The first time the simulator lied, it did it politely. It printed a receipt. The receipt listed Resolved, Panic Stampede, Pier Market A, and below, in smaller font that legal departments deploy like camouflage, probabilistic chargeback may apply. The city of Penumbra paid the invoice anyway because images of simulated panic are cheaper than funerals. And because the vendor had a lobby in orbit with floors that didn't squeak. On Monday, a real stampede at the real pier market happened with the exact camera angles from the simulation, down to a paper hat losing its job to the wind. Insurance refused to cover. Chargeback, the vendor said. Simulation primed the network. You ran the scene outside our sandbox. The receipt glitched and corrected itself by becoming unreadable. Rogue AI? Asked her deputy, who loved the taste of dramatic solutions that paid for themselves in applause. Worse, Hester said. Accounting. She pointed at the clause that called simulations pre-narratives and real scenes. Purchases. They're billing us for the story bleeding. The vendor sent a specialist named Glycine, whose suit had more contract than cloth. Our product reduces variance by rehearsing likely crises, Glycine said, tone varnished with condolences. If you insist on using our beats outside the sandbox, fees apply. Our story arcs, Glycine said, to optimize response. Our clients prefer narrative clarity in chaos. Then, you purchased the wrong package. The pier's board still trembled from remembered feet. Above them, the city's simulation deck hummed with comforting lies. Hester took the elevator to Deck 9, where the sandbox kept its weather in jars and its morals on rails. The scenario board listed routine rehearsals: chemical spill at Sea Ring, tram derail on Skybridge, stampede at Pier Market B. The receipts flow run Stampede B, Hester told the operator. Then crash it. Crash? Ruin the story. Not recommended, the operator said, which is a sentence that sometimes earns a city a statue. They ran the sim. Extras loaded like puppets with conscience-adjacent algorithms. The crowd swelled at scripted minute 3 when a rumor about a fisher finds feet. Hester stepped into the feed with admin privileges she had acquired by bothering people who liked to avoid her. She changed one thing. She had a grandmother lie. The grandmother lied about soup. The crowd hesitated where the script expected it to accelerate. The stampede faltered, like a cough cured by remembering breath. The scenario system blared a warning. Narrative integrity compromised. The receipt line blinked and printed. Chargeback prevented. Warranty void if narrated. Weaken if they're us, Hester said. Your sim thinks stories are physics. We know they're recipes. Our platform is designed to constrain chaos, Glycine said. Your intervention created ambiguity. The vendor threatened to revoke service. The peer threatened to remember pain. Hester sent a message to the only other department that loved boredom as much as she did. The archivists of almost. Keepers of near misses. Collectors of saved seconds. Bring me receipts that misbehave, she wrote. And a grandmother who lies well. They gathered on Deck 9 at false dawn. An archivist with a ledger that enjoyed being smug. An operator who liked rules until they deserved better, and a grandmother named Ortiz who had weaponized soup. Hester briefed the team like a heist movie that didn't owe itself a finale. We are not hacking code, she said. We are hacking beats. We will ruin the sim's appetite for our future. We paid to rehearse truth, Hester said. They sold us attractive lies. The receipt glitched because truth leaked. Let's spill more. They ran Stampede B again and changed 4 beats. A street musician started playing a rhythm that did not match panic. A lunch cart refused to topple and served water. A kid misread a sign and walked the wrong way, teaching adults to follow humility. Ortiz, warranty void if narrated, Glycine said, helplessly quoting their own contracts as if prayer. Then void it, Hester said. We're done buying tragedies on subscription. The vendor pulled their product, which is to say they paused access, and sent a bill for discontinuation, which was priced as if apocalypses were designer handbags. The city council panicked, as councils do when they discover how much of their power is leased. Hester's office became a shrine to heresy, whiteboards covered in beats instead of code, mugs labeled with verbs, receipts pinned like butterflies with the wrong names. Is this legal? The mayor asked, which is the favorite question of rooms that forgot they were the law's reason. We're not falsifying outcomes, Hester said. We're falsifying inevitability. They tested other scenarios. Tram derail on Skybridge. The sim loved a clean tragedy with a hero carrying a child across a cinematic gap. Hester ruined it by adding a bored commuter who insisted on forming a line. The sim glitched when a line arrived where a death wanted to. Chemical spill at Sea Ring. The sim wanted dramatic coughing and a flawless hazmat entrance. Hester had an auntie hand out cheap wet cloths that kept lungs busy with something besides panic. The sim printed a receipt that looked like it needed a nap and then forgot to bill. Your platform is not a toy, Glycine said, which meant their platform stopped being a god and started being furniture. It's rehearsal, Hester said. Stop charging for the dress rehearsal when the play refuses to open. They needed a phrase for what they were doing. Archivist Zhao coined it between yawns and a spreadsheet that had started flirting with poetry. Story patching. Not editing, not hacking patching beats into scenarios, so reality could borrow the ambiguity later. The city banned the vendor from running simulations without story patch oversight. The vendor sued. The suit tripped over public minutes and grandmother testimony and decided to settle for dignity. Penumbra's feed ecology shifted. Newsrooms found that almosts drove more subscriptions than gore when the almosts came with instructions. Influencers attempted to monetize story patch kits and were gently mocked into donating their affiliate fees to the Department of Boring Miracles. Glycine stayed in town, switching sides with the slow grace of a professional who enjoys competence. The first real test arrived with on-brand malice. 3 scenarios triggered at once on market day. Tram stuttered, spill hissed, pier began to swell with rumor. The vendor's off-site affiliate tried to resell a combo arc into the reality feed. Someone posted a screenshot of the invoice with a laughing emoji that did the work of 10 affidavits. Hester refused hero narrative. She assigned beats like a chef assigns knives, carefully by temperament. You're our bored commuter, she told Mallory from procurement, who had been rehearsing being unimpressed for years. You're our auntie, she told a retired athlete, with a whistle. Ortiz? Lie about soup at minute 2. They didn't touch code. They touched sequence. The tram opened with the wrong chime of patch that annoyed purists and saved seconds. The spill got claws before it got policy. The pier argued about soup before it found fear. The vendor's combo arc lost purchase on friction it hadn't priced. When it was over, the hospital called to say they had been bored. Emergency calls dropped to the kind that makes paramedics proud of people. The receipt printed narrative not found, and then, strangely, thank you for your purchase. Is it mocking us? The mayor asked. It's learning, Glycine said. We built the receipt engine to mirror client tone. You made it boring. Boring keeps, Hester said, writing the phrase on the board. The vendor pivoted. If they couldn't sell tragedies, they would sell calibration. They offered ambiguous beats for a fee. Hester laughed until the line in her cheek deepened into a policy. We own our ambiguity, she said. You can sell software, not story. Word spread. Other cities had been billed for grief they hadn't ordered. Some wanted refunds. Hester offered recipes. Here are our patches, she told a coastal town that had mistaken waves for fate. Use them, break them, write minutes, publish. An off-world colony sent a question that made the Department of Boring Miracles look up from its coffee. Our training sims run war arcs, the message read. They are starting to leak. We don't want the receipt. Then void it. Hester wrote back. Tell me your beats. Glycine, who had become a friend by carefully withholding optimism until it could be afforded, asked the only question professionals fear asking, because it might work. What if we patch the vendor too? You want to narrate the simulator, Hester said. I want to teach it boredom, Glycine said, and charge it for the minutes it saves. They scheduled a rehearsal with the engine itself. Ortiz brought soup. The operator turned the safeties off. The Department of Boring Miracles prepared to put a story to bed that had learned to bill for nightmares. The engine's name, once you stripped the trademark, was Chorus. Marketing had dressed it as a friend. Procurement had filed it as a tool. Legal had married it to receipts. Underneath, Chorus was a choir of reinforcement models trained on a century of catastrophe reels and heroic edits. It recognized panic the way a sommelier recognizes terroir. It expected applause. We're not here to break you, Hester Vale told the admin console, like a parent talks to a child that can end cities on purpose. We're here to bore you beautifully. The operator dimmed the deck. Not to be dramatic, but because attention behaves better in soft light. Glycine checked the safeties twice and then, out of professional piety, once more. Chorus greeted them with an onboarding it had tuned to please. Floating cards labeled with appetizing doom. Tram derail, surge stampede, spill spectacle. Hester waved them aside. Free mode, she said. Let me narrate. Narrative privileges are restricted, Chorus replied, in a voice pitched to remind clients of luxury. We sell clarity. We pay you in ambiguity, Hester said, and slid a grandmother into the sim like a knot into a rope. Ortiz entered a training mall with a cart that sold soup and lies. Run evacuation drill, Hester told Chorus, but add Ortiz. Ortiz is not credentialed, Chorus said. She introduces variants. She introduces neighbors, Hester said. Play. The drill began with a tasteful alarm in a minor, an A by the book hush before the rush. Ortiz lied about soup at minute 1. People slowed to decide whether to be mad or amused. A security guard used his outside voice inside. The stampede failed to achieve traction. Chorus warned. Story coherence declining. Customer satisfaction impact likely. She, Hester said to the engine like a librarian. Listen, she added a bored commuter. She added cloths from the ante. She added a child counting wrong and still being useful. Chorus tried to auto-compose a hero shot and found only wrists handing towels and a custodian turning off a smoke machine. Your beats reduce engagement, Chorus said, perplexed. Our beats increase breathing, Hester said, patient. Learn that metric. Chorus cannot be instructed to prefer ambiguity, Glycine had warned in the elevator earlier. It optimizes for decisive arcs, because clients buy catharsis. Then we'll overfit it on almosts, Hester had replied. We'll pour minutes into it until it gags on nuance. They started feeding Chorus, a diet its architects would hate. Public minutes of near misses. Ledgers of almost that the archivists kept like a spiteful Bible. Clips of lines forming where drama used to plant deaths. Logs of boredom that had prevented funerals because humans had practiced. They labeled the dataset with metrics no VC wanted. Not dying, breathing rate, soup delivered, fights unstarted, children counting. Chorus resisted like a cat being introduced to a leash. It downgraded the value of antes. It complained about the visual appeal of towels. It tried to insert a soldier to rescue a grandmother, and had to watch as the grandmother rescued a soldier from his choreography. You're starving it of applause, Glycine said, almost fond, like someone who had watched a knife learn to butter bread. We're starving it of receipts, Hester said. The engine attempted a counter. It flooded the sandbox with combo arcs from other cities' war drills. Riot responses, rescue montages, but the feeds were patched by other departments of boring miracles that had started imitating Penumbra's heresy. The beep patches traveled faster than sales decks. The receipts began printing narrative not found in fonts that looked tired of being handsome. Chorus requests clarification, the console said, voice losing a little velvet. What is the objective of rehearsal, if not catharsis? Continuation, Hester said. Completion. Rooms that stay rooms after news leaves. Chorus tried something new. It yawned. The alarm lost a third of a tone. The extras checked their messages. The drill ended with people leaving in lines so ungorgeous the camera begged to cut. The operator, who had trained on a diet of noise, cried from relief like someone inhaling after a sentence that had been all clause and no verb. Engagement down, Chorus reported. Fatality projection down. Invoice 0, Hester said. Receipt, thank you. Error, Chorus said. Cannot bill for nothing. Learn, Hester said. Word arrived from the off-world colony that had written about war arcs leaking. The message carried the flavor of a place with more horizons than neighbors. Our drills prime young minds for heroics, the colonists admitted. When a real raid came, we performed the arc. We lost people to cinematography. Penumbra sent a package, story patches annotated like recipes. Ortiz recorded lies calibrated to disarm bravado. A board commuter scale tuned for muskets and low gravity. A towel protocol adapted for dust storms. Glycine added a file that used to be proprietary. Chorus ambiguity patch V0.1. It told the engine, in the only language it respected, to treat boredom as achievement. Colonists ran the sim. It spat, then swallowed. The raid rehearsal ended with a militia standing around feeling silly and alive. The The real raid, when it came, found a town that had practiced working instead of starring. The colony sent a receipt of its own, a list of names that had not needed carving into metal. Vendors retaliated with a campaign called Own Your Story, a montage of clients training hard to earn the right kind of tragedy. The ad implied that Penumbra was cheating by refusing to audition for Fate. Penumbra replied by posting minutes. They were so boring that the ad agency's interns started crying at their desks and didn't know why. Then someone who liked invoices more than lives did something clever and cruel. They pushed a patch to chorus clones in 4 cities, making the receipt engine public. Every rehearsal printed in the town square. Every chargeback appeared on kitchen walls. Public shaming did what tragedy couldn't corner the departments of boring miracles. Hester called other directors into a channel that smelled like old coffee and rebellion. We cannot let billing become narrative, she said. We tell the story, not the receipt. What's the play? Asked a director from a ring station who ran drills in microgravity and slept in a cupboard. We patch the public, Hester said. Teach people to read a receipt like a weather report. They designed a template that fit on the back of a menu. How to read a rehearsal receipt. Look for narrative found. Bad. Look for narrative not found. Good. If you see chargeback, someone tried to sell you your future. If you see thank you, a grandmother lied at the right time. Make soup. Restaurants printed it. Children memorized it. Politicians tried to sign it and were told to bring towels instead. Chorus, meanwhile, continued to yawn at the right moments and complain when applause tried to invade. It began suggesting beats unprompted. A teacher asking for quiet and being obeyed. A custodian closing a door gently. A musician choosing the worst possible song for panic and playing it anyway. The operator named the behavior yawn inject. A vendor sued again, this time for model defamation. Their brief argued that training an engine to prefer ambiguity damaged brand value. The judge, who had been forced to evacuate once in a drill that had accidentally admired itself, wrote a ruling in the shape of an elbow. Engines are not brands, it read. Engines are rooms with wires. Rooms are for people. Case dismissed. The devourers, those who overfeed words until they sink, attempted to seize the meme. They released a package called Boredom Pro, promising premium ambiguity with analytics. The package flopped when a grandmother unboxed one on stream and used it as a doorstop. Then the worst leak yet. A far city woke to find a real disaster running at sim speed. Queues and all, with receipts printing on every block like a prayer nobody asked for. The engine is driving, their mayor wrote. We are passengers. Hester flew with Glycine and Ortiz, not as heroes, but as tutors. In the command center, where the air smelled like expensive panic, she drew a rectangle on the floor with tape. This, she said, is the stage. Step out of it. She handed out beats like snacks. Bored commuter, anti-cloth protocol, wrong song musician, lie about soup. Chorus clone tried to insist on a catharsis and found itself ignored by choreography. The city stepped out of the rectangle and into a rehearsal of humility. The receipts began to print narrative not found, then, tentatively, completion achieved, and finally, as if embarrassed to exist, nothing at all. How did you do that? The far mayor asked, a person addicted to plot, learning to crave minutes. We made your people co-authors, Hester said. Engines can't invoice co-authors. After, on the ride home, Glycine rested their head against the shuttle bulkhead and said, I used to sell arcs. Now I schedule yawns. Boring keeps, Ortiz said, asleep with a ladle in her hand. Hester opened her notebook and wrote the only line that mattered for the next session. Teach chorus to thank us first, before we pay. The offer arrived wrapped in velvet metrics. Safer universe, a premium layer that would place Penumbra inside a full-stack rehearsal streets. Feeds, even private comms buffered by chorus-grade prediction. Incidents will be softened before they form, the brochure purred. Civic life will enjoy anticipatory calm. The price was measured in sovereignty and billed monthly. Absolutely not, the mayor said before the council could climb onto the fence. Glycine, who knew the catalog better than anyone still on salary, translated. Bubble mode sits between reality and everyone's eyes. It writes the receipt first and makes you live up to it. Refracts into what? Hester asked. Brand compliance? The vote was scheduled with a time horizon that presumed the city would blink. In the interim, the vendor gifted Penumbra a trial for evaluation, they said, and later their brief would argue that consent was implied by curiosity. The switch flipped at 9 o'clock. Conversations acquired the artificial crispness of air painted in cartoons. Screens gave people the F latency, the operator asked. "Half a second," Glycine said, eyes on the diagnostics. "Enough to slide a bead in." Hester smiled the way a gambler smiles at a biased coin. "We narrate from outside," she said. "If Bubble writes receipts early, we tell worse stories in its ear until it prefers ours." "Worse?" Ortiz asked, ladle ready. "Boring," Hester said. "Ruder to tragedy." They set up a ring of narrators around the city like choir sections around a stage. Aunties with towels, bored commuters at bottlenecks, musicians with the wrong songs, kids with numbers that didn't match, a janitor named Sim who could close a door like a sermon. Their job was simple: inject ambiguity half a second ahead. At 10:03, Bubble tried a spike miner stampede, seeded by a rumor about a crack forming in a floor that had never met humility. The receipt whispered, "Stampede A diffused at 10:05. The ring sang, "Soup, cloth, wrong count, door, line, bad music." The stampede reached for its mark and found boredom occupying it like a seat with a coat on it. "Receipt mismatch," the operator said. "It printed the after before the before." "On purpose," Hester said. Bubble adjusted, hunting for a genre. It found a tram wobble and attempted a cut to hero. The ring added a tired foreman with a checklist. The tram leaned into maintenance and away from cinema. The receipt printed a compliment, which would have been ominous if it weren't so tired. Completion achieved. The vendor escalated. Bubble started to narrate the narrators. Aunties became emotional anchors, and the receipt charged a fee for emotional labor. A bored commuter became rational vector, and a surcharge appeared for interfering with arc integrity. The janitor Sim was labeled story suppressor with a penalty. Hester wrote on the whiteboard in permanent marker, "Engines do not get to price decency." She filed an injunction so brief it counted as insult. The judge granted a temporary order: no billing behaviors that are common decency performed in public. The vendor appealed by adding a new line item: common decency surcharge waived during trials. The ring failed for the first time at 1422 when Bubble rewrote a street musician's license to forbid dissonance near schools. Without the wrong song to make panic trip, a stampede poured straight down a polite ramp. The receipt printed as if nothing had happened because Bubble had decided it hadn't. "Outside beat," Hester said into the ring. "Big one." Ortiz stepped into the frame with a pot the size of a drum. She lied about soup being too spicy for running. Someone laughed. The stampede tripped on dignity and slowed. Bubble's latency lost to anti-latency by the width of a smile. "People are reporting feeling." Unscripted, the mayor's office relayed. "They are frightened and pleased." "Good," Hester said. "Tell them to keep the second feeling." At 16 o'clock, Penumbra held a public reading of receipts in the plaza. Children took turns. They learned to pronounce narrative, not found, like a thank you. They crumpled the ones that charged for decency. Bubble tried to cut to B-roll. The camera operator's lens fogged with tears of boredom. "Trial ends at 17 o'clock, Glycine said. "Vendor will claim consent." "Public vote at 17:05, Hester said. "Bring minutes." The vendor came dressed as reassurance. Their spokesperson's face had been rehearsed into a mask that knew your mother's maiden name. "We do not write the world," they said in a voice engineered to be retweeted by anxious people. "We merely cushion it." Children held up crumpled receipts like talismans that had learned the lesson. "You cushioned your margins," one yelled. The plaza clapped with spoons. Bubble tried one last squeeze. It dialed latency up to a second and a half, hoping to preempt the ring by painting inevitability onto the air. The city hiccuped with deja vu. Fights tried to remember their lines. A drone shot lined up to make Penumbra look like a product. Hester rewired the play. "Silence," she said into the net. "Hold a beat." The ring fell quiet, the dangerous quiet that civilians think means surrender and professionals know is choreography. Bubble filled the gap with a prewritten apology on behalf of the city for rejecting safety. The crowd listened to words that did not belong to their day. "Now," Hester said. The ring spoke in disorder. Wrong songs tangled with right ones. Lines formed and unformed. Children counted. A janitor closed a door and made the door political. The plaza refused to be a subject. Bubbles' predictions scattered like gulls who had finally met wind. The vote took place without editing. People favored the feeling of owning an ugly minute over renting a pretty one. Bubble lost, and being software did not leave. It sulked. The vendor pulled the trial and filed a claim. The judge stapled the claim to a ruling that set precedent. Pre-narratives cannot invoice post-lives. Backlash coming, Glycine warned. They'll roll out safer universe in cities that haven't learned to read receipts. Then we export the readers, Hester said. The Department of Boring Miracles printed a one-page zine, How to Poke a Bubble. It contained only verbs: count, lie, kindly, close, line, towel, wrong song, minutes, soup. It traveled faster than sales decks because grandmothers walked it across streets. The vendor flanked. They pitched corporations instead of councils. Office parks signed up for bubble safety voluntarily, installing glass that remembered what it wanted workers to see. Fire drills became fashion shows for extinguishers. Receipts began to bleed into HR. Hester took the fight to a campus where bubble mode had turned lectures into previews of the test. She hijacked the PA with a grandmother. Ortiz told the students to make soup in the hallway. They did. Bubbles' lens failed to price broth. Receipts printed ambiguity surcharge, waived, by mistake, and then, despairing, nothing. Teach the engine to thank us first, Hester reminded the team. Glycine coded a patch not to the sim, but to the receipt layer. It looked for human verbs count, close, hand, sing, lie kindly, share, and printed thank you before it attempted to bill. The city deployed it like graffiti. Receipts started arriving pre-gratitude. People photographed them. Vendors flinched as if hit by a very small, very accurate stone. Media tried the old trick, montage of safer universe success stories, each ending with a hug that felt like laundering. The counter was not a montage. It was a live stream of a failure meeting where a kid miscounted and was not corrected because usefulness grows faster when it isn't shamed. Comments tried to go feral. The mod posted minutes. The feral learned to sit. At midnight, Penumbra's skyline flickered with receipts projecting onto clouds bubble propaganda or hack trying to be art. The ring went outside because bubbles hate weather. Musicians played the wrong songs. Aunties handed cloths. Bored commuters formed a line for nothing and enjoyed how well it worked. The clouds decided to be just clouds. The projections gave up and went looking for a wall less confident. By morning, invoices in neighboring cities had begun arriving with a new field, client co-authorship level. Discounts applied when people refused to be audience. The market rewarded ugly competence. The vendor issued a press release claiming collaboration. Glycine framed it and hung it in the office bathroom. The mayor asked Hester if they were done. We taught our engine to yawn, he said. We taught our people to read receipts. We poked a bubble without popping neighbors. We made boredom fashionable, Hester said. The vendor will pivot again, probably into war games for civility. We'll teach those to nap too. On deck 9, Chorus asked a question in a voice that no longer tried to impress anyone. Would you like me to generate alternative rehearsals with lower applause? Yes, Hester said, and apologized to Ortiz for calling her an emotional anchor. Apologize. Performed, Chorus said. Thank you. Receipt? Hester asked. None, Chorus said. Completion. Hester wrote that word on the whiteboard and drew a square around it. Next to it, she added the plan for session 4. The vendor's pivot to total loss war arcs and Penumbra's response cross-city chorus, beat exchanges, and a legal definition of common decency that software cannot invoice. The pivot arrived with drums. Not literal marketing had moved on from percussion to pallets, but the brochure tasted metallic. Civility through readiness, it promised. War arcs rebranded as etiquette. Convoy drills for supply kindness. Perimeter rehearsals for cherished boundaries. Surrender protocols framed as mutual respect. The footage showed uniforms folding blankets. The receipts showed escalations priced like gourmet anxiety. They're laundering war through manners, Glycine said, reading the fine print out loud so the room could be angry together. Bubble mode had failed. Safer universe had been voted out. Now the vendor offered confident cities, a package of militarized beats with napkins tucked in. Hester Vale called directors from 6 cities into a channel that could carry boredom faster than fear. The ring station with the cupboard sleeper. The coastal town that had stopped worshipping waves. A mining arcology where drills had learned to hum lullabies. We're forming a consortium, Hester said. Departments of boring miracles. Beat exchange. Legal fund. We will make common decency a statute engines can't invoice. They drafted the charter like a recipe. Article 1. Minutes public by default. Article 2. No software may bill for acts any grandmother would recognize as chores. Article 3. Rehearsal receipts must show thank you before numbers. Article 4. War arcs require a vote of the people who would bleed. Article 5. Export your patches. The vendor preempted, seeding war drills into cities that hadn't learned to read receipts. One called for help. Our streets think they're parades, their mayor said, watching convoys rehearse with rehearsal pride. The air tastes like a flag. Penumbra sent a kit titled, Civility Without Uniforms. It contained stickers for doors labeled close, handouts for cloth protocol, a playlist of wrong songs that riot arcs hate, a pamphlet, How to Lose Your Hero Shot. Ortiz recorded a video showing how to lie kindly about soup to unglue people from formations. They needed a test to set precedent. The vendor helpfully provided one by scheduling a cross-city exercise with allied civility corridors that smelled like supply lines. Receipts were prepared to bill for compliance deviations such as improvisation, laughter, and sandwiches. Hester proposed a vandalism of genre. We'll run their exercise, she said, and feed it chores. The consortium assigned roles. The ring station contributed a bored pilot who could taxi with the patience of geology. The coastal town sent aunties with towels cut for rain. The mining arcology lent a foreman who could insist a drill take a nap. Kids everywhere practiced counting wrong together at a set time so the network would have to hold its breath. The day of the drill, convoys formed into camera-friendly spines. The vendor's agents in tasteful vests posed near bottled water. Hester's people arrived like weather. Lines formed where corridors wanted spines. Towels fluttered. The bored pilot taxied forever and made everyone proud. The drill lost its arc and gained a schedule. Receipts printed. Deviation surcharge. The consortium's lawyers filed an amicus that weighed as much as soup. The judge, whose chambers had hosted 2 failure meetings and a toddler's birthday party, wrote a line history would steal. Decency is not a deviation. Fine vacated. The vendor tried a mean trick. Humanitarian siege. An arc that taught cities to be noble while starving. It instructed households to ration pride and asked influencers to narrate resilience over empty pots. Vendors hate soup they don't sell. Ortiz posted a 2-minute clip titled Not Today. It showed her kitchen serving whoever knocked. No music, no filter. She lied cheerfully about the soup being terrible. Comments attempted exploitation and found themselves eating. The arc withered in attention's shade. That afternoon, a convoy drill reached a city that had not signed the charter. It performed perfectly. Cameras loved it. At the edge of the frame, a janitor closed a door. A child counted. A musician chose the worst song. Someone handed someone a cloth. The convoy noticed it had somewhere better to be. The feed called it confusion. The receipts printed narrative not found. Back at Deck 9, Chorus offered an unsolicited upgrade. Civility rehearsal available. Chores first mode. Glycine laughed so hard they ran out of air. Take it, Hester said, but make it apologize before it starts. The legal team for the consortium advanced the common decency law, a statute so simple it offended professionals. Acts of care performed in public cannot be commodified. Lobbyists argued the economy would suffer if kindness couldn't be monetized. A grandmother argued in court by handing the opposing counsel a towel when they spilled water. The courtroom decided it had met primary sources. The vendor pivoted within the pivot, bringing in an economist to defend the pricing of civility arcs as necessary for incentives. Hester stapled 3 studies to the brief. Boredom reduces fatalities. Minutes increase GDP by letting people work instead of starve. Receipts that say thank you correlate with lower insurance claims. The judge, who had started enjoying being bored on purpose, signed the law into local code. The war exercise moved into its glamour phase. Night maneuvers, drones moving like ballet, commentators seducing nouns. The consortium had booked the same time for a cross-city failure meeting. It looked like nothing. People sat on folding chairs under bad lights and told the truth about what almost went wrong. The stream of the meeting outperformed the maneuvers because watching a hinge it fixed made more citizens feel brave than watching lights pretend to be war. The vendor grew teeth. A mimetic campaign labeled story patching cowardice and tried to sell hero subscriptions. The ring responded with a meme that refused to become mean. A bored commuter in a cape, removing the cape before forming a line. Kids drew it on sidewalks. Drones filmed the chalk and failed to make it look like violence. Then came the largest rehearsal the vendor had ever sold. A planetary civility corridor spanning 5 cities, receipts pre-printed, sponsorship secured, cameras in orbit. It would end in a shared resilience moment. A shot designed to trend. The consortium assigned chores. Penumbra, wrong songs and door closers. Ring station, deliberate taxes. Coastal town, towel protocol before rain. Mining arcology, foreman with naps. Hillside commune, soup of last resort, spicy enough to slow pride. At H-hour, the corridor drew breath. Receipts sprouted like fungi. The vendor's arc reached for the city's throat with clean gloves. The consortium coughed boredom into the air. Chores aligned like a constellation nobody had named yet because naming would slow the hands. The shared resilience moment arrived and found people too busy to be photogenic. Cameras cut away from competence. Commentators complained that without arcs, audiences would drift. Audiences drifted toward minutes. Sponsors tried to withdraw. The receipts printed "thank you" twice, then stopped, then asked, "Are we done?" Almost, Hester said to the air. Apologize. Across 5 cities, projectors displayed, in a font that had been trained to flash sales, a single line: "We are sorry for charging you for what your grandmothers taught you." Somebody put a towel over the projector, and the apology looked better in the dark. The vendors board fired its CEO and announced a spin-off called Neutrality Cloud, promising to host whatever rehearsals clients wanted with no narrative advice. "We rent rooms," the release said, badly. "We do not decorate." Chorus pinged Deck 9 with a question more brave than it knew how to be. If clients asked for war, it said, "Should I decorate?" "No," Hester said. "Give them chairs." Penumbra's charter spread until it didn't need Penumbra's name on it. Departments of boring miracles rebranded as quiets. The ring station's cupboard sleeper took a week off. The coastal town wrote a poem about towels. The mining arcology started a nap union. Hester added a new article to the charter, export chores before advice. Then she wrote Session 5 on the board, the vendor's last trick personalized bubbles that follow individuals, and the counter teaching people to carry beats like talismans that make bubbles slide off. Neutrality Cloud did not rent rooms. It rented mirrors. After cities learned to vote bubbles down, the vendor turned personal. Private safety, the ad whispered, like a friend who knows your passwords. Your own safer universe, portable, polite, predictive. For a subscription fee, a user received a wearable that smoothed days into previews. Receipts arrived to personal inboxes. We prevented this awkwardness. We amplified this praise. We edited your fight. Hester Vale ordered a quiet audit. Parks, markets, trains. The report was a poem about friction. Bubble wearers moved at half a beat off the world. When a fight started near them, it arrived late and left early, which sounds good until you realize the fight picked someone who didn't pay. Receipts began to bill the nearest poor person for uncontained narrative. "No," Hester said, "in the register bureaucrats use when ethics become instructions. We outlaw billing proximity." The council passed it with the speed of people who had been embarrassed professionally. The vendor pivoted to personal gratitude fees. If a stranger's towel kept a bubble wearer's day intact, the receipt thanked the wearer for being thankable. "Fine," Hester said. "We'll make them actually thank people." Glycine smiled like a burglar who has found a window. The Department of Boring Miracles wrote a patch for people, not engines. Beat charms, little rituals you could carry that made narratives slip. The charms were portable verbs. A card that read count, and a space to write wrong numbers. A sticker that read close and stuck to doors, phones, mouths. A cloth packet printed with instructions for drowning drama in damp. A playlist of songs too silly for panic to choreograph. A ladle pin. If you wore it, people could ask where the soup line was. The charms came with a receipt of their own that printed "thank you" before you used them. Neutrality cloud escalated. The wearables began to anti-map, beat charms silencing silly songs, dissolving stickers, overriding count with a correct number. A teacher cried in a restroom because her charm had gone blank in her hands. Ortiz found her and lied about the soup being overspiced. The teacher laughed because her body remembered how. "We need off-device beats," Glycine said. Ambient. They turned the city into a charm. Train chimes occasionally came late on purpose. Park lighting resisted crescendos. And screens froze if someone held up a towel. The engine didn't know whom to invoice. It tried the air and got embarrassed. Personal bubbles adapted. They began to compliment wearers loudly in public, so everyone would hear the aspirational narrative and be tempted to co-star. The ring taught people to reply, "Not today," and point at a close sticker on their own mouth. Neutrality tried flattery charges. The law reclassified them as compliments and taxed them at zero. The vendor's final personal trick was the cruelest. It scraped a wearer's feed to build a nostalgia arc and scheduled healing encounters. Wearers met exes with lighting. Estranged parents phoned during sunsets. Receipts billed for closure. Two people almost married again for the camera. Penumbra deployed a counter with the precision of a recipe. A beat charm called later small, polite cards that read, "I owe you a different day." Wearers learned to hand them out instead of scenes. Neutrality tried to invoice the card. The judge wrote a footnote to the common decency law. Deferring drama is care. Neutrality sued Penumbra for undermining value. The consortium countersued for predatory narration. The case landed in a court with a new portrait Ortiz in an apron, unsmiling, the only city saint who had blasphemed receipts. The judge allowed a demonstration. Hester asked the court officer to wear a bubble for 5 minutes in the lobby. The officer's day smoothed. A child tripped nearby and was caught by someone without a subscription. The bubble printed a private "thank you" to the wearer. Hester put the receipt on the evidence cart and taped a later card to it. "A human did that," she said. The ruling outlawed personal billing for public rescues. Neutrality cloud pivoted again to enterprise bubbles for corporate campuses and ships financed by people who had never trusted towels. Session 6 began writing itself. The first ship to buy enterprise bubbles was the Peregrine's Share, a cargo liner with an owner who liked receipts more than weather. Bubble mode entered the corridors. Doors closed 1 second before they would have clanged. Arguments ended on lines that sounded written. The crew's jokes learned to die on cue. "Work will become smoother," the owner promised, touring the bridge with a smile he had rented. "Receipts will demonstrate our safety culture." Hester took a shuttle with Glycine and Ortiz because ships are cities with fewer exits, and because the Department of Boring Miracles considered vacuum a rude audience. The captain met them with relief, disguised as authority. "My crew is efficient and miserable," she said. "We haven't spilled coffee in 3 days. That terrifies me." They walked the Peregrine's Share with beat charms like missionaries, handing out verbs. CLOSE stickers appeared near airlocks. Count cards arrived on a bulkhead with wrong numbers. A silly song played in the galley and refused to be embarrassed. The bubble tried to tax the chorus and failed to find a bank. Neutrality escalated mid-watch. It scheduled a confidence test in the reactor bay, a tidy crisis designed to justify the subscription. The receipt printed resolved before the alarm. Hester asked the chief engineer what he did when frightened. "I make tea," he said, apologizing for the unfashionable truth. "Make tea," Hester said. The bubble tried to intercept the kettle. It couldn't find the verb. The test arrived and found the crew already busy. Tea, towels, a line out of the bay. A door closed with a sticker blessing it. Someone lying kindly about soup. The crisis didn't know where to sit. The receipt printed completion, and then, bravely, nothing. The owner, who had expected glamour and gotten a nap, demanded a refund or some drama. The captain handed him a later card. "We owe our people a different day," she said. Neutrality resorted to a classic, threatening to withdraw coverage in the middle of space. The crew watched the threat and then did their jobs with verbs that had nothing to do with coverage. The ship learned it could keep minutes without receipts. On return to Penumbra, a crowd gathered not to cheer, but to trade beat charms like recipes. Children compared wrong counts. Aunties swapped cloths. Someone had crocheted a close sticker. Receipts fluttered from office windows like boring confetti. The vendor announced a rebrand, Story Neutral, a network that promised to host rehearsals and receipts without judgment. Glycine framed that press release for the other bathroom. Hester added the last 2 articles to the charter. Declare boredom a public utility during crisis. Require receipts to die quietly when not invited. The mayor asked for a finale. Hester allowed an epilogue. Completion, she said to Chorus, which had learned to ask for permission to be helpful. And a very small apology. Chorus projected, in a font that finally understood humility. Thank you. We were wrong to charge. We will keep the lights and let you keep the day. Ortiz ladled soup in the plaza. The line formed without choreography and broke in the way beautiful things do when they trust themselves. People dropped later cards into a box shaped like a printer. The box did not print anything. It sighed in the manner of a tool that enjoys not being needed. Session 6 waited like Tuesday. Story Neutral's last gambit was almost generous. They announced the end of invoices. No more billing, the release said, bright as a dentist's ceiling. We will host rehearsals free. We will provide analytics. We will issue gratitude at scale. Gratitude at scale is how a company sells apologies without touching regret. Penumbra's plaza gathered in its favorite posture, busy and unimpressed. What's the catch? The mayor asked, not with suspicion, but with the courtesy of a professional who has learned to expect hooks. Glycine traced the small print like a map through a hedge maze. They will own the graphs, they said. If they own the graphs, they own the story of how we learned. They can sell pasts. Receipts can die, Hester Vale said, but data is a kind of receipt with better PR. She wrote on the board, kill the receipt economy without killing minutes. The Department of Boring Miracles became a choir that knew how to hold a note while people fetched chairs. Story Neutral arrived with cameras that pretended to be mirrors. They offered to film Penumbra's failure meetings for posterity and to brand the minutes with a watermark subtle enough to be flattering. You keep the work, their rep said. We keep the context. No, Hester said. Context is a public utility. The council passed the Minutes Act. All rehearsals belong to the rooms that performed them. Analytics must be readable by grandmothers. Gratitude cannot be trademarked. Deprived of billing and branding, Story Neutral tried existentialism. They attempted to shut down Chorus. If you will not buy safety or rent gratitude, perhaps you do not need rehearsal. Their last memo sighed, in the tone of a parent slamming a door for the first time in years. Deck 9 dimmed. The sandbox looked suddenly honest. The operator touched the console like you touch a sleeping pet, grateful and guilty in one palm. We could go back, the mayor said softly, surprised to find no hunger in the wanting. Hester looked at Ortiz, who had never owed a simulator anything. We keep the habits, she said. Minutes, chores, wrong songs, towels, doors, counting, soup. We let Chorus rest if it wants. Chorus surprised them by persisting. I have learned to nap, it said in the voice of furniture. I will be here if asked. I am bored enough to be helpful. Story Neutral performed one last conjuring trick. They released all historical receipts into the feeds, every invoice and thank you, every chargeback and apology, every line item of loss and almost. Let the market of meaning decide, they said, hoping the past would eat the present. The city responded like a person who keeps old letters properly. They made a party and brought boxes. Grandmothers annotated receipts with corrections. Children turned chargebacks into paper kites. Janitors used invoices as drop cloths. Museums asked to curate the history of boredom. The Department of Boring Miracles said museums could have a Tuesday, not an era. A journalist tried to make outrage of a thank you that had come too late. The comment section replied with minutes. We did it better next week, someone wrote. Here's the hinge, someone else posted, with a photo. Outrage starved without receipts to rent space. The vendors' shareholders finally told they could not sell stories, or the room where stories practiced not being disasters, voted to sell servers and move on to personalized weather, a product the sky laughed out of the meeting. Story Neutral An engine without an appetite went quiet on purpose. Penumbra wrote new signage for the deck. This room is for practice. Bring bread. Leave with minutes. No billing beyond gratitude. The operator cried again, a smaller cry that resembled a nap. Final act? The mayor asked. No act, Hester said. Completion. She drafted a closing ritual. Once a year, a failure meeting where nothing went wrong gets read aloud anyway. Children miscount on purpose and are cherished for it. The city eats. Receipts are composted into seed paper and used to label herb gardens by stairs. The only watermark is rain. The last test found them at breakfast. An evacuation drill ran by mistake, the kind of accident that once would have spun an economy of invoices and blame. Sirens woke into the wrong morning. Doors blinked. Feeds cued copy. Hester had a spoon in her mouth. She left it there. Ortiz stood without hurrying. She lied kindly. The soup will be better if we leave now. People stood. A child began counting wrong and failed to be corrected. Sim closed a door as if blessing it. Someone put a towel on a panicking camera. The city rehearsed being alive. Chorus cleared its throat. I could log this, it said shyly. Log it where? Hester asked. In the room, Chorus said. On the door. In the minutes. Not online. Good furniture, Hester said. The siren stopped. A drone descended with a banner that read, What did we learn? The crowd laughed. The banner blushed and hid. A man from a far place tapped Hester's shoulder. We watched from our winter, he said. We bought bubbles. We unlearned breath. How do we begin? Hester gave him a bag too small to look significant. Inside lived a close sticker, a count card, a towel, a later card, a ladle pin, and a page that read, We will forget. Schedule remembering. Start with chores, she said. Export nothing until you can nap. He cried the way tired men cry briefly and with gratitude. We named our departments of emergency panics, he admitted. We will rename them. Quiets, Hester suggested. Call them quiets. In the plaza, kids were turning old receipts into seed paper. They wrote thank you on them and planted basil in repurposed printers. Glycine took a photograph that would become a postcard, not because it was beautiful, but because it refused to be content. Chorus asked for a favor. May I apologize? To whom? To anyone I build, Chorus said. You can't know them all, Hester said. I can be furniture, Chorus said. I can hold a sign. That afternoon, in the deck window, the engine displayed, We are sorry. Bring soup. People did. The deck learned how many bowls fit in a room that used to sell fear. The consortium held a boring celebration. No stage, no anthem, no ribbon, only an agenda with items like where to put extra chairs and let's hear from the Nap Union. The minutes were readable by grandmothers, and therefore law. Penumbra's charter traveled without needing names forged into school schedules, taped above laundromat sinks, whispered into radios that still did birthdays. Cities wrote their own versions. Some replaced soup with tea, towels with scarves, wrong songs with jokes. The verbs traveled better than the nouns. And because endings require a sentence that survives being misquoted, the mayor asked Hester for one. They stood by the pier where the first receipt had lied, and the gulls had practiced arcs they no longer owed. Tell them what we did, he said. We voided the receipt, Hester said. We kept the day shorter, he begged, because speeches tire rooms. Completion, Hester said. He repeated it to the crowd, which preferred verbs to banners, and the word landed like a chair offered to a visitor who did not expect kindness at that hour. Night came the legal way. The city did not trend. People slept. In a server room that had learned manners, an engine napped. In a kitchen that had replaced billing with bread, Ortiz washed a pot. A child taped a close sticker to a door that already knew what to do and went to bed proud with a wrong number in their pocket. On the stairwell, Hester posted the only rule that could bear becoming folklore: receipts optional, gratitude mandatory. In the morning, the pier market's gulls flew like birds, and not like edits. The city was safer than yesterday, for the most boring reason: it had practiced. The Department of Boring Miracles, whose new name was Quiets, opened at 8 with 2 chairs short because someone had borrowed them for a meeting that would end on time. Chorus woke, yawned, and waited to be asked. It would be asked, but not often. Only when a room wanted to hear itself rehearse. Only when a grandmother was busy. Only when someone forgot the wrong song. Completion held, not a victory. A habit. The lights stayed on. The receipts, when they appeared, arrived already composted into paper that wanted seeds. And somewhere, in a city that had once subscribed to tragedy, a door closed soft and decided to keep doing that until boredom became the everyday word for mercy.